Hi all, I'm going to do a rather different video now. The Chess Olympiad is on and I want to show you how you can enjoy it. All you need is Chessbase Lite and access to the Week in Chess. If you go to the Week in Chess site, do a Google. There's this guy Mark Rauffer who for years and years every week has been collating all the best events around the world, the highest quality games, and putting out PGN files for people to download. So if you go to the Week in Chess, find a PGN file like Games in PGN. So PGN is the universal standard for storing chess notation. We can download this PGN. It will go straight into our Chessbase. So I'll open up Chessbase. So if we want to enjoy the highest, the most high-rated players, we can sort by ELO. And then we get like Grischuk as white after 4 rounds or something, or Carlsen. We can have a look at Carlsen games. Russia, the first team, went down to Hungary, and I was looking at a game last night on that, and I'm going to present that next as part of this video. So Russia went down to Hungary in the men's Olympiad. I think this is round 5. So two heavyweights, Peter Liko against Alexander Grischuk. This is a rock solid positional game, but it's dramatic that Russia, went down. So I'm going to present it anyway. It's a 53 move game. Liko kicked off with D4. So knight F6. We have Nimzo, avoidance of Nimzo, fairly standard. D5 now. G3, now an imbalance crops up in the position because Alexander Grischuk, he decided to take on C4. So potentially, when the bishop fianchettos, it's a long range bishop. And actually, there's an interesting point about this game that even you can even consider manoeuvres like bishop B7 later if you get this nice long range bishop. So bishop C6 bishop G2 knight C6. And now this cheeky queen A4, just hitting that C4 pawn from the side. Black interrupts this with bishop B4 check, and after bishop D2 plays knight D5. So why does Grischuk want to hold on to material so desperately? Well, I think it can achieve a solid position, assuming he can sort out this issue, this light squared bishop on the queen side. So white took on B4, knight C takes B4. And now another sort of gambit pawn is offered very soon actually. Sorry, knight C3 after bishop D7, white castled, and after A5 Peter simply played queen D2. So it seems a very modest kind of opening, prepared to lose the C4 pawn for seemingly not much. And after black castled, now white plays knight D2. So okay, he's hitting that C4 pawn again. With that A5, there wasn't any preparation for B5. B5, you can just snap it up now. But the D4 pawn can be taken. But in doing so, then black would lose the B pawn. And there's a kind of chain reaction here, structurally, which I'd like to describe for the sake of it, that before we even play it. So knight takes D4, bishop B7. You see that black's pawns are going to be splintered. These guys are all going to be splintered after bishop takes B7. From a positional perspective, black's then going to sort of get pressure on the B file. And also, if white has to recapture on C4, that could become a tactical target for black, and that's really the gist of the game, that the pawn structure was sliced, and then later it was black pawns which seemed to be more vulnerable in this long grinding endgame. So that's the backdrop for this game. Knight takes D4, so bishop takes B7, so isolating these pawns. Rook B8, so black's getting some pressure on the B file, and it looks fairly dangerous to me that now after bishop C8, you see, if black's really solved this light square bishop problem by having a lot of pressure being exerted on this diagonal, if white's really going to try and regain that pawn now, which is what happened. So knight takes C4, and in fact C5 also looks as if not only the semi-open B file pressure, but these knights are kind of nice and active and in the center. So, and also this issue again, this bishop a6 is now cropping up. So what does Liko achieve from the opening? Well, he's got a playable position. He's going to handle his c4 square with care, and he does so in a sort of masterful fashion. After b3, knight f5, he plays queen e2. Black plays queen c7, and now we do get a lot of trades going on, which makes this game on the surface look a bit dull, but it's the endgame which is really the interesting bit. So we get some trades going of the rooks, and now this bishop takes c4. So we have here the scenario which I kind of tried to emphasize earlier, that look at the structure of both sides. White has the asset of this long range bishop, so there's various resources implied, like possibilities of even bishop b7 that black has to factor into the variations. Structurally, so much for black's isolated pawns. White has shared that now with these two isolated pawns, so they both got isolated pawns on the queen side. So it's really a knight bishop versus two knight scenario. So how does Liko grind a win out of this? In fact, black is keen to exert more pressure on c4 rapidly, so he offers up queen d6 as another exchange. But here Liko's declaring his intention to try and win the game. He plays queen a4. In fact, queen d6 would be bad for him. He doesn't want to handle this pressure too quickly on c4. So queen a4, threatening actually queen e8, which could be dangerous. That's actually queen f8, but that's besides the point. Black wants to be able to play something else potentially. He plays actually h6. I think it will be far too dangerous to go for this f7 pawn now with queen e8 check and takes because of queen d2 and knight d3, stuff like that. But let's not go into that. Let's go into this endgame, this grinding endgame. So knight comes to d3. So Liko's actually inflicted a pin on the d file, which we'll see is exploited now. After knight b5, queen d8, engines would suggest queen d7 here. If black's going to be forced to play knight e5 later to try and exchange queens, then queen d7 straight away might be better. So queen d1, and now the queen goes to d7 anyway. Now Liko gains a bit of space advantage, but at the cost of creating some weaknesses. But with this move g4, now f4, seemingly depriving the knight from e5. Nevertheless, it can go to e5 now anyway. So the queens come off. So we reach that endgame I was been talking about. So how does white grind from here? Well, okay. He plays now knight d6, and potentially the plan here, as well as holding on to c4, he can also try and get this bishop like this to protect c4, and then knight b7 will be forking these two guys. So this is the ingenious mechanics of exploiting a slightly better pawn structure in the endgame. I know it's super dull stuff, but this is what happened. This is what happens when you get two players over 2700 most of the time. It's a dull game, a grinding endgame though, but a very important for both countries. So okay, so knight b6, bishop b7, the brilliant move of the game as far as I'm concerned, with this idea of bishop a6 and knight b7. It's neat. It's a neat use of two minor pieces in the end game. So king f8, the king marches up as well, threatening maybe to come over the queen side or towards the center. So f5 tries to put a break maybe on e4 being useful as well. White simply plays h3. Now g5, very energetic stuff from black, but really, I mean, it doesn't seem to do black too much good. So we have now this bishop a6. So remember, the sneaky idea is knight b7 to fault these two pawns and try and grind out a win. So black took again, getting the pawns off the board, maybe increasing the drawing chances, but probably aware he's in slight trouble with these two committed pawns. The white minor pieces are in black's territory. White definitely has a small, nagging, horrible advantage, which black has to deal with somehow. So knight c6, the knights start coming in to white's position, but at the cost of a pawn, and he's offering up Now after bishop b5 he offers the e5 pawn, which white takes, but black's going to snap up the c4 pawn soon. But 2 pawns up now. The c4 pawn's dropping off though, but at the expense of the king getting much more active. So king d4, and we get a pure knight and pawn ending. So white is currently just 1 pawn up against Grischuk, one of the most feared Russian GMs, 2760. But Liko has things under control in this endgame. He's winning now the a pawn, so he's going 2 pawns up, and after knight g6 he calls Grischuk to resign. So an ultra positional dull game, I suppose you could say, but a critical, match winner, because the other 3 games were drawn. So this is how Russia has gone down. Let's have a look at this again. So Catalan's on the rage, and we see this knight c3, a5, a bit curious actually, a5. That's the major points of it. Seems to be a liability later. Supporting the knight, I guess, so this knight's now free to, threaten knight takes d4. Okay, so a tactical orientation. Maybe it looks a bit kind of weird and passive for the queen to just have to humbly retreat, but the damage has been done, as we see later. This pawn later becomes a target in the endgame. So knight d2, and then this slicing action. So black for the moment's got fragmented pawns, but black's restoring the damage of pawn structure balance with this bishop c8 to a6. So white's getting a seemingly terrible isolated pawn fairly soon. After the rooks come off, especially, now this bishop takes c4. So how did white really have an advantage here? As I say, the long range bishop, it was proven in this example game to be slightly better. So the knight and bishop better than the 2 knights. So the queen exchange was first of all avoided there. This very interesting move a3. So if knight a6, just queen takes a5, I think it will be fairly safe here. So the knight ventures into the white position. Now after knight b5 hitting the queen, this queen d1 again. How many retreats in this game of the queen back to d1? So now we see these seemingly very energetic moves on the king side, g4 and f4. Another offer for the queens to come off, which is taken up, and now this invasive move knight d6. So the beautiful mechanism here, after gaining this slight structural advantage, but then seemingly losing it, but then seemingly having a potentially better knight and bishop, the mechanism bishop b7 to a6 to hold that c4 whilst trying to get one of these guys. It's a neat mechanism. So knight b6, bishop b7. So for the knight to move, c4 has to be first protected with bishop a6. First some other pawn moves here. Now this key bishop a6, so knight b7 to fork the 2 pawns is coming up, and now we see that forking movement. So the start of the grinds, bishop b5, forcibly winning a pawn after the knight's having to move, and now f takes e5, and black's getting into real trouble in this endgame. Even though a lot of liquidation of pawns has happened, the king is getting very active, and this knight and pawn ending, even though it's dramatically simplified from earlier, white's just getting another pawn, and now Grischuk's just had enough after knight g6. There's too many passed pawns to handle. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube, and if you're not a week in chess person, check it out every week. PGN's for you to download. You just need something like Chess-Based Lite or something, and just order by ratings or whatever you want, or your favourite players. It's one way of enjoying the Olympiad as well as using the official sites. You can always trust the Week in Chess to have independent view on the tournaments, the events, and a consistent way of getting PGN files. Okay. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.